Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Dr. Lorre. I'm a nurse, author, and trauma burnout expert. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about where we find ourselves now as nurses, as a global profession, and where we're heading. As most nurses know, we are kind of an oppressed and marginalized occupational class, historically speaking. And this is due to any number of social forces, but also part of what is happening that is keeping nurses from self-empowering in a very collective and global way is this trifecta of trauma that we talked about in an earlier episode. And what that trifecta is that we have the individual traumas that we've all been exposed to and we've all recovered from, either wholly or in part, and whatever is in part is still embodied within our body, waiting for the right time to heal. And then we have another layer of trauma exposure in the form of unavoidable nurse-specific traumatization, and that's like second victim, vicarious traumas. These are inherent with the profession of nursing, and again, we're a high-risk occupation for trauma exposure, just like many of the other combat veterans, firefighters, law enforcement officers, first responders, etc. And so we know that that comes with the job, and we do our best to navigate that. So we have our individual traumas and we have the unavoidable, and then here comes the trifecta, which is the avoidable trauma exposure, which is oftentimes secondary to healthcare system inadequacies. And that's really, in my opinion and in my research, what is driving nurses from the profession now in unprecedented numbers. Is the system is broken. People are no longer willing to work in toxic work cultures, and nurses are really not wanting to be sacrificed on a corporate chessboard. So many of them are leaving their roles or the profession. And it's not just here in the United States. So what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about where we are and where we are heading if nurses come together and heal together individually and as global nursing communities, that we really can shift the paradigm into nursing 2.0, which is the nurse safety and professional well-being edition. So let me share my screen for a moment, and it'll just take me a little bit of doing here, and I'll show you what's happening around the world. This is all part of my research, all of what is in my book, which is on the shelf behind me here, and in my Breakup with Burnout for Nurses Academy. So you can see here that in the predominant English speaking countries, because that's my native language and the only one I really read and write with any degree of fluency. So that was the reason I had to limit my research to English speaking countries. But you can see here the UK, the US, Canada, and Australia. We're all in the same trauma, nurse-specific trauma burnout boat together. Harsh working conditions for nurses across the globe. And so, in the UK, we have 75% are undervalued, underpaid. More than 1 in 4 have experienced workplace violence. There's shortages throughout the care continuum. And 95% of providers in the UK struggle to hire nurses. 100% of nurses agree this is the worst healthcare crisis in the UK history. Now, over here in the US, we're not faring much better. 96% of nurses have one or more PTSD symptom. 21% of nurses meet the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, and 81% or more are burned out, don't feel supported at work. And then again, similar to the UK, we have high percentages of understaffing. Nurses are not feeling safe at work because they are not safe at work in many times, and about 2/3 of us are dissatisfied or indifferent about our role. We go to Canada, our neighbors to the north. Here I'm in southern Arizona in the US as I'm broadcasting today. And so for me, the Canadians are north, way north of me, and they're in a similar situation, chronically understaffed, under-resourced. They are too are struggling with physical assault and violence in the workplace. They're struggling with nurse vacancies, and about a fourth of those nurses plan to leave the profession altogether. And that's worldwide. So in the UK, nurses are leaving in droves. In the US, I wrote an article called The Great RN. I can't even say it. The Great RN Resignation. I'm not even going to edit that out, just so you can know that this is coming to you live from my heart to yours. All right, and the same thing in Australia is that they have some of the shortest working conditions, short staffing, under-resourced. About 20% of their nurses plan to be leaving in the next 2 to 3 years, and they have high degree of nurse violence as well. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Bear with me here as I make those transitions. And then I'm going to get another screen up to share with you, because I want us to understand, it's important for us to understand where we are, right? Where we are as individual nurses and all that we are enduring. And we are enduring a lot and have been throughout the history of nursing, right? So there's some great books out there of which you can find, but if you look historically from the beginning of time until now, nurses have been marginalized, disenfranchised, and oppressed as an occupational class. And you can see evidence of this everywhere. Now, back in the day, in the early 1980s, when I was working at a teaching hospital at a med-surg ward. This was the time when we wore all whites, if you can believe that. Like you don't even want to know what those uniforms looked like when I got home. And this was in a time when patients were still allowed to smoke in their hospital rooms. And this was also a time, believe it or not, when we would go to do our charting at the nurses station. That's what it was called, because that's what it was the nurses station. That if a provider, and providers in that time were predominantly male, so, and they were predominantly doctors. So if a doctor came and needed a place to sit, then we had to avail our seat while we were charting, mid-charting. We'd have to stop so they could sit down and do their charting or write their orders. And so that's just a small example from my life of like, wow, we're at the nurse's station. I'm doing my nurse's duties. And I have to be in a smoke-filled room, taking care of people. And also I have to give up my seat at my workplace. And I can't do my charting. So there's just, if you really start to open your eyes and look around, and you can see evidence of this everywhere. And so not to be critical, but just reflective and honest about the historical arc that most nurses have been thought of and treated as second-class citizens. And so it's time for that to change. It's long past time for that to change. But the challenge that we have as a global nursing community is that we are not thriving, and we are not well in terms of burnout, which is really, when you start digging down, it's really that trifecta of the individual trauma, the nurse specific trauma that is unavoidable, right? That comes with, and then there's that the avoidable trauma of healthcare system inadequacy. So we have individual, we have unavoidable trauma exposure, and then there is avoidable trauma exposure. And it's a big fat trauma sandwich that keeps nurses not in optimal professional safety or well-being. And so it's really hard for us to come together as a global community and pave the way to better working conditions. And for not only for ourselves, but also better quality of care, safer care with improved patient outcomes for those in our care. So let me share my screen again, and I'll stumble on a few more words while I do so, and share with you where we have potential to go as a global nursing community. And this is part of my work in my book, in my academy, the nonprofit work that I'm doing, is that we have the tremendous potential. Where there is huge challenge, there's also tremendous opportunities for growth. And this is what I call the road to nursing 2.0, the nurse safety and professional well-being edition. So right now what we have, and let me bring my cursor over, is that we have a lot of avoidable nurse traumatization happening at the clinical level, often secondary to healthcare system inadequacies, such as being under-resourced, understaffed, underpaid, undervalued, under fill in the blank. So this is happening in our clinical settings. This is also happening both for students and faculties in nursing programs across the globe. We are not exempt from the same type of trauma exposure that clinicians are. And the same is happening for our nurses who are working in the community settings. So through my work, and I'll be introducing all of this, unpacking all of this in the episodes and all of my services through my nonprofit organization, that we have, if we can come together, the first step before we start really shifting the paradigm is we can't be working from our open wounds. We can't be bleeding out as we are metaphorically speaking right now. It's a time for us to all come together and really look at this trifecta of trauma that is so often misattributed to burnout. But it's not just burnout. And so leaning into those layers and learning how we can use microdose practices. So I have here, part of my framework is microdoses matters. These are micro practices to nurture one's nervous system in the busiest of days throughout the day. Then we have the broader framework and a 5-step process called Your Innate Care Plan. And these are 2 ways that we as a global community, as individuals and as a global community, can come together and stop the hemorrhaging, right? Stop the burnout and the trifecta of trauma that is really keeping us disempowered in our roles as nurses, because we represent the majority of healthcare professionals worldwide. So we are in a position to affect mass change and get to this tipping point. And then also I've proposed a trinity of integrative nursing principles to guide practice, to guide nurse self-care, right? And really it's not self-care, it's more like, how do we even prioritize our own safety and professional well-being? It's so much more than self-care. Nurses that I work with would prefer that we not use that term at all, but sometimes it slips out. All right. And how we can guide system and leadership change. And if we all come together and we work together on the healing, right? The healing, that the potential that can be realized from healing, we can affect the tipping point and start to shift the current paradigm into the nursing 2.0, nurse safety and professional well-being paradigm. So this is, let me see if I can stop sharing. There we go. This is the work that is before us, and certainly the work that is before me as I write out the last decade of my career. I have devoted myself and all of my resources to doing what I can to help us as individuals and local and state, national, and international communities, shifting the paradigm so that we are well and safe in our professional roles. So I hope you found that interesting. It's just a launching off place from where we are. and where we're going. And until next time, from my healer's heart to yours, thank you for the important work that you're doing. Namaste.